All right, so first off, thank you to Hook and Loop and to Joanne for this beautiful space and our sandwiches and all of these places. So in this talk, I'm going to cover two things. Why you might not want to use Backbone with jQuery, and then how to do it. I don't have any biases against jQuery. I love jQuery. Some of my best friends use jQuery. But there's a couple reasons why you might not want to use it in your app. So this is a live presentation. If you guys want to follow along, there's a link on the bottom of the page that'll loop you in real time. Okay. So there we go. Who am I? I am Adam Krebs. I'm a freelance developer and an interactive designer. I help out from time to time on Backbone and Underscore. I'm a big fan of their APIs. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me afterwards or send me an email or ask me on GitHub. So let's start off with what is a Backbone view. So it's a discrete chunk of logic. So it's a small part of your app that has a core component associated with it. So let's say a sidebar or maybe a map view or even the entire part of your app. It's tied to a DOM element. This is key. And then it updates based on the model state. Then the second part of it is it feeds the user's interactions back into the app state. So clicking on something, entering text into a field, rearranging a graph, what have you, it feeds it back into the app state. And the core thing to understand about Backbone views is it helps kind of keep your logic separated from your app state and then the DOM state. And it allows you to update the DOM kind of reactively in response to changes in your app state. So another thing it helps you do is it manages the scope of your app and then and also the hierarchy of the app logic. So kind of way back when, I'm sure all you remember developing jQuery things, and you kind of put everything in like one big object or one big scope, and then you pass everything around that way. Views help you kind of scope down parts of your app, and so that into different chunks that kind of make sense for the app. So Spotify, for instance, SoundCloud uses a play button everywhere that passes around, is tied to a model that you can play anywhere you want. So you can kind of pass these views around as well, which is pretty big. And then it's built around a few jQuery methods. So Backbone says it has a light dependency on jQuery and then a strong dependency on Underscore. A light dependency basically means we're not going to require jQuery for you. You have to set it on the backbone.dollar property of Backbone. And if you so desire, you can swap out these methods, and I'll go over that in a second. But basically, your app won't crash if you don't have jQuery on the page yet. You just assign it later, and then you can lazily use the methods on backbone.dollar. So I want to go over backbone.view because I think it's really important. It's about 100 lines with comments, and you can read it very, very quickly. Fortunately, I have more time than I thought I did, so I'll go over this quickly with you. Basically, the important thing to know is this CID property is set right here, which allows you to bind multiple views to the same element. And then you ensure that the view is bound to an element. You can run your custom initialize logic right here. And then finally, it delegates the events based on the events hash, which if you've used Backbone before, you're probably familiar with creating your events and binding the hash in that way. So what I'll focus on is in the delegate events, essentially, the way that this aspect feeds back into your app state, and you can hook these DOM events back to methods on your model. And all it is really is this.$L.on. And then, so you see it's really, really tiny, and then it's a major, major feature how small it is. And it means that guys like Marionette can come along and add extra things to your app and make it a little bit more useful. Backbone is very minimalist, so it really doesn't give you anything here. The main thing to realize is that is what this first line says, which is Backbone views are almost more convention than they are actual code. It's not a whole lot in there. Basically, it binds these model and collection properties to this separated view object that isn't either a model or a collection. All right, so what's wrong with jQuery? So it's slow. If anyone has created lots and lots of views within their app, especially collection views, especially views that create a lot of sub-instances, you'll see it. Each time you create a new jQuery context, it costs something. And each of those contexts have to be passed around, and they have tons of properties on them, and it's slow, and you can see it in any app. It's big, and with a lot of the new HTML5 methods, it becomes a little bit unnecessary as well. And so especially if you're designing for mobile, or in the case where you have control over the environment where it's going to run, like a dashboard app that's going to be in this lobby, for instance, you don't need jQuery. It doesn't need to be in your app. It doesn't need to be in your page. Well, everyone has jQuery, right? So why get rid of it? The moral of the story is that we have these new APIs. We have document.query selector. We have query selector all. We have better functional tools. We have underscore. We have these things that just simply didn't exist when jQuery first came out. And jQuery was great because it kind of pushed a lot of these conventions forward in ways that force people to think about their app and force people to think about the way they were using JavaScript. But especially in cases where I just talked about, you really want to try and avoid relying too much on them. So let's take our Backbone view, or a Canvas view, or a Leaflet view, and stub out those methods that rely on jQuery, so you don't actually need them. So let's say that we've got like an app that's built around a map, for instance. You can do something like put the methods from that map on your view, and you can pass that view around and call methods directly on the view that would do something like pan to different areas. You can have a Backbone collection of marker points, and then you can filter for like different types of points of interest. You can do something with all of that data, and then have it update on the map itself, all within the context of Backbone, without feeling like you're kind of cobbling together APIs from different libraries. So, and for Canvas and for Leaflet and all these different separate APIs, it's really important. And then also for D3. So D3 is also an interesting example because all of these different things could be collection methods. They could have data associated with them. And this may be a small part of your app. So you look at this example and you say it's just a graph. But if you're having other parts of your app update based on this state, you're going to want to be able to pass around model instances or collection instances or different app scopes. So maybe you can be able to change the domain on this and you want it to update somewhere else. It's really important to be able to have control over that and pass it around in your app. So let's take everything that we can and turn it into a view. So we can have a map view, we can have a D3 view, we can have a native view, whatever you want, we can pass it around. But then better yet, let's make these mixins. So you can override the behavior on your views. You can say this is a view, this is a type ahead view. This is a map view. This is D3 view or a graph view. And then you can add those behaviors to your views, and you can pass them around as mixins. And then a big idea is to be able to take view adapters. So kind of common, pull out common methods within Backbone, and we can override the parts of Backbone that we don't need because we're not using jQuery. And so you can turn everything into a Mixin then. So the big thing that I did, and this was back in about February of this year, if you've been following the Backbone repository, there were a lot of back and forth about the best way to get rid of jQuery, or at least have Backbone not depend on jQuery so strongly. And kind of a big thing with that was whether we should have a separate utilities object that you can pass around and you can stub out these methods on, whether it wasn't possible entirely. And after a lot of back and forth and a lot of hand-wringing and a lot of, like it was like a 103 issue thread or something like this, we finally came to a point where we have, 7 methods here that you can override on a subview, or you can mix in, that will enable you to have the same behavior as Backbone, as a normal Backbone view, but with a different DOM library underneath. Like let's say you were really thrilled with Ender, you could use Ender with it, and the public API would stay almost exactly the same. And so those methods were things like create element. So this was a big thing for someone, I think actually from the Marionette team, wrote that he wanted to be able to take his Backbone views and replace it with Cheerio, so he could server-side render and test it, or feed it to the client. And just by replacing this one method, he was able to use Cheerio, and it same API. Remove element, just pulls the element from the DOM. These had been requested by people for a while. A single event delegate and a single event undelegate, which are kind of finer-grained delegate events or finer-grained event hash, and you can do these directly. Like I also work on Backbone Stickit, which is a data binding library, and this is useful for that kind of thing. We also have set element, which existed before, and set attributes, which is basically just was a proxy to jQuery.adder, and you pass it a hash of events, and it overwrites there. And these are all very, very small changes. The one major change, the one breaking change, is this last one, backbone.dollar, which is the way you want to handle your views, is kind of these view element scoped selections. So you can say, given my form input, or my form element, find all the inputs on it, or find find all the buttons, whatever you want. Then basically the public API just changes. Instead of it being guaranteed to return a jQuery instance, you can now return a node list or anything with a numeric length property. And then this means for plugin authors that instead of piggybacking on the jQuery objects, you then just use a for loop or underscores each to iterate over the properties in that returned collection. There's more info on the wiki, and I wrote it up. It's not especially good at the moment, but I'll rewrite it. We're kind of pushing to have this out in the next version of Backbone. It's already on master, but we're still working out some of the kinks. Into the future. So a lot of the ideas that are in backbone.view are also in web components, or Polymer, or Angular directives, or Ember components if you've worked with these things. Kind of the idea of using a controller to mediate between the DOM state and between the state of your application. It's very similar in concept to all of these. They all have their own special way of doing it. But Backbone views are so simple and so kind of dumb, they should be able to work with all of these. The really interesting thing that, I don't know, how many of you have worked with React? How many of you have heard of React? So React is really cool because it kind of takes this, this concept of one-way data flow and it provides this virtual DOM that means you can call render on your view as many times as you want, which extrapolates the DOM, which is the slowest part of your app. And I'm sure a lot of you have dealt with kind of the problems of managing the state of your views and making sure everything's up to date, while also being sure not to hit the DOM too many times, because you feel it. You feel how slow it is in the DOM. So React is kind of great for being able to declaratively describe what your view should look like, and then you call render as many times as you want, and then it doesn't cause a reflow, it doesn't cause a repaint. All the expensive things that come with touching the DOM, you can kind of avoid because you've got this virtual DOM. So it's excellent at managing UI state. It's data manipulation, and for sync, it kind of boots you to jQuery, but this is where Backbone comes in, right? So you can pass around these models just as you would for views, right? And I'm not advocating throwing out the entire view layer, but React is very good at these kind of different sync states or at these UI states and passing things around. So Backbone is fantastic. Backbone has a bunch of really strong minimal APIs and it forces you to think about your app in terms of its data, not the components, which React does. And models and collections are a big piece of this. So kind of thinking about Backbone as your data store, its best features are its persistence and sync and for data manipulation. And it's, you can essentially think of a collection as a decorated plain JavaScript array. So you can think of it as, as the same concept of an array of just holding multiple objects, but with the ability to persist to the server or to local storage, and then to query that information on your collection as you need it. And so Backbone is especially excellent for that. And you can already take the ideas of React's Flux from Backbone events and use anything as kind of as an event emitter to send events to different parts of your application. So Backbone events is this small little module that tells parts of your app when things have happened. And it's really, really good because you can mix it into absolutely any object. All the classes in Backbone have it, and it's dead simple to add to any object you need. And then the sync is based on jQuery's Ajax, which is great UX. The GitHub guys just came out with this polyfill for a proposed replacement for XHR that basically mimics jQuery Ajax, but natively in the browser, and they called it window.fetch. And I've been playing around with it, and it basically makes your dependency on jQuery's Ajax basically none. It's all the things you want from Ajax, but wrapped in kind of a smaller module with promises. And I've been playing around with adding that to Backbone, and I have a gist up if anyone's interested in that. All right. So what's next? So a lot of people agree that React has some really smart ideas, and immutable data structures seem like the way to go, which React is kind of playing with and that work with underscore. But I have a feeling someone's going to take the concepts from underscore and the concepts from immutable.js and kind of mash them together to give React the better interface that it needs, and then to kind of add a little bit more immutable data to either underscore or to Backbone as well, and kind of provide a little bit easier state management, because as a lot of people talk about, it's not easy managing state in Backbone. So thank you. I think that's it. I'll answer any questions if anyone has any. Thanks.
Is there any discussion about making
In the view layer?
Yeah.
So I think the view layer is going to stay as it is for now. I think the idea is to kind of keep it as basic to as many and useful to as many projects as possible. But I think people will start to come up with different projects that augment Backbone View a little bit more and add some ideas.
So this might be hard to answer in 2 minutes, but can you talk a little bit about the process behind working on Backbone as a contrast to maybe what you heard Sam talk about with Marionette?
Sure, it's a lot less organized. You guys have a great system of organization. Ours is a lot more kind of a little more laissez-faire, a little bit. It tends to be different people's opinions, and then we try and come to a consensus on it. But ultimately, Jeremy Ashkenazi, who wrote the framework, is the benevolent dictator for life. And so he comes along from on high, and he'll say, nope, that's not going in, or yes, that's going in. But in general, a lot of people have looked at the Backbone repository and say, you guys haven't pushed out a release in forever. What's the problem? Are you not innovating? And I think one of the things that's really fantastic is that the API has remained so consistent for so long, and it kind of proves that there's a lot of good ideas without the churn of needing to rewrite your app from scratch, needing to think with different concepts and ideas, and it really is the core methods that you need to build your app.